Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Astrology. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by esteemed astrologer, author, and lecturer, Arielle Guttman. So thank you so much for joining us today, and how are you doing?
Thank you, Colum. I'm really fine. I'm getting over a cold, so I may cough a little bit here and there, but last week I didn't even have a voice, so I'm much better now.
Well, I'm
Thank
hoping
you.
that goes out of your system as soon as possible. But thank you so much, and it's a great pleasure to have you on today. So, in today's episode, we're taking a deep dive into astro mapping. And Ariel, you've put together a fantastic presentation and chart examples that we're going to get into later. So, let's begin. What
Yeah,
would you like to talk about first?
I'm going to go into subject matters that probably are not covered in the other courses, spin-offs. I've been working with astrocartography since the mid 80s, so I would say 40 years now. And when I first met Jim Lewis, I was just really awestruck by the whole technique and how he was presenting it. And so I quickly became one of his students and became certified by him in one of the earliest certification programs he ever offered in it. And it's still a fascination for me. It was just Jim's brilliant way of presenting it that actually showed how the planets act out their natures on the landscape. Sometimes you don't always see how a planet is really working. And you might say, I'm getting a transit from this planet or from that, but I don't really feel the effects of it. I'm not really sure how that's really working in my life. But when you put them on the map, sometimes they really come alive in a way that they don't just from observing the transit of them in your life. And that could be for many reasons, but I'd like to, start this course out with more deeper issues involving astrocartography, what you can't, or astromapping even, because we'll use many, many different types of mapping. What it's good for, what it's maybe not so good for, the philosophical and psychological implications of mapping. Does a person really need to move, even if they think they need to move? Sometimes they'll say, I really want another place to live. And you look at their map and you see, well, you've got it pretty good to where you are now. I mean, what do you hope to improve on? And so, you know, after 40 years of doing this, I've probably had every type of case out there. I've had a busy astrological practice these past 40 years. I'm great. I'm blessed. I feel very blessed to have had that I didn't have to go out seeking, astrological business, especially in a time when it wasn't so popular like it is now.
It's a really good
That
point because it's become very popular in recent times. And I think it speaks to not only astrology in itself tapping into the zeitgeist right now, but we're living in an age where people move often from away from their hometown. There's many people like myself who move from England to the United States, people moving all around the world, where we're talking 100 years ago, people were pretty much limited to a certain degree to maybe a couple of towns in their immediate area. So maybe local space maybe being better around those times, but at this time, people are just traveling all over the world.
exactly, exactly. Some people are just drawn to a certain place and they'll say, I've always been drawn to Greece, or I've always been drawn to Japan, or Ireland, or wherever it may be. And you have to follow up with that. Like there's a reason for that. And there may or may not be planets in that particular place on their map, but timing is also a part of it. It's not just astrology. It's not just about place, and if the place you were born, it's about the time you were born and the place you were born. And so astromapping is really a combination of time and place and being at the right place at the right time. So that's Jim Lewis, and this is the book we co-authored together back in, what year was that? 1989. He and I worked on a number of charts, I guess 136 different charts. We were actually had 200 or 300 charts, but we got them down to 136 for this book. I did a lot of the research for it. He did a lot of the research. We both wrote different parts of it. It was really a great education for me to not only be mentored by him, but also to write this book with him. I learned so much, and he was such a good writer. I think the vertical axis is more stable. ICMC planets, they're not moving, but the horizontal axis is like, it can be very sloped or it can be just a little bit sloped. I think that's a little bit more like mutable, movable, and it's not as stable for the person living there, because their life, if they're living mostly on ascendant descendant lines, I believe, they are constantly adjusting to the other people that they're coming into contact with all the time. And they don't have a firm sense of grounding always, or really what their goals are outside of the influence that other people have on them. And that maybe how they want to please the other people. It could be their marriage partner, it could be their mother, it could be their child, it could be anybody that you're working close, you're in close proximity with, but you're always sort of in that ascendant descendant planets are always sort of serving that relationship, or how you feel you are doing in relationship to other people, how they see you, how you see them. Whereas I feel like the vertical axis the roots of the tree, the IC, the branches, the leaves, all the way reaching to the sky, the MC. It's also, our parental axis, and, how stable was that when we were a child? And also, how well do you do in the public? Let's say you're born with a stellium of planets in the 8th house or even the 12th house, and you relocate and everything suddenly comes on to the midheaven, and now you're in the spotlight. Is that like a deer in the headlights? Or is it something you can actually embrace? So again, there's a lot of psychological issues and factors that need to be looked at. And these are things I talk about with clients when I'm looking at their map and how perhaps it would be for them to relocate to whatever designated place they've chosen. Or sometimes they'll just say, oh, I don't really have a place in mind. I want you to come up with something.
I really like how you bring it up, the modalities, because for me personally, my natal chart, obviously born in England, I'm a Libra rising, so I have the cardinal axis. And as I moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, I'm a Leo rising with my relocated chart. And interestingly, with that fixivity, it's the place I've stayed in the longest. I've been here about 8 years because in my 20s and my teenage years, I was always moving from one place to another with that cardinal action. But now I'm here raising a child. I have a very fixed chart, so I'm staying here for the immediate future. So I like how you bring in the importance of modalities into the charts that you're looking at.
It's interesting that you're raising a child and you're under the Leo rising too, because that really kind of connects with children. But a child will make you more stable. That sometimes it is the other person in your life. It's an ascendant descendant still, okay? Sometimes it is the other person in your life that your life is revolving around, rather than you just, okay, what are my personal aspirations here? And your personal aspirations may be to be the best parent you can be for that child, and to give them your all. And that's a wonderful thing. And so this is something that, is a basic. I think everyone will have learned this in the earlier classes. But for people watching this video, maybe this is just a summary of the fact that the ascendant is the planet rising. It's like the sunrise. It's rising, and it's rising in power. It's just coming up from the dark, from the hidden regions. So it's just about personal growth, like the ascendant. Who am I? The descendant is the planet setting. So it's already been in the upper, world of the public sphere, and now it's setting. Now it's moving into the personal sphere. But this is a place where one marries the planet's energy or merges with others in a personal way. Sometimes it's in a professional way, but it's usually the type of relationships you have there. The midheaven is usually the planet overhead, and it exerts a great deal of influence in worldly affairs, fame, notoriety, prestige in general. Career matters are enhanced. And then the IC, of course, is the one that's invisible underground. It's the only one of the four angles that you can't see at all, because in rising and setting, you can just see them coming up or going down. But in the IC, you can't see it at all. It's really within the roots, the inner life of the person. So, but I think IC planets are great for setting up a home. It's like when people come, you can hear their keywords when they ask for the astrocartography help. I really want to find a home, or I really want to find a partner, or I really want to improve my career prospects, or I really just need to find myself and get some space or whatever. So, I mean, those are clues right there that can direct you to these four different angles. Now, planets are archetypes. They're alchemy. They're medicine. Are they cooperating with each other? Are there more than one or two planets intersecting through a location? If so, if there are three or four, you saw that first map I showed, there were a bunch of things going on, crisscrossing over a very small area of land. So are they competing with each other? Are they wanting each other's, are they giving you more power? Or are they actually draining your power because you're trying to respond to all of them? So that's another thing you want to take into consideration. Again, this is people's observation when they first look at a map. They'll say things like, oh, I've got a lot of planets over there, or they'll say, I have no planets over there. But I've lived there all my life. What does it mean that I don't have planets there? So, again, you're looking at more not just astrocartography, we're looking at different methods. I used to do workshops quite a bit, and probably in the 90s, early 2000s, called 5 Ways to Relocate a Chart. And I would use, the ACG map, the transits and progressions, which Jim called CCG, cyclocartography. You would use the relocation chart. You would use params, crossings, planetary crossings, and local space maps. So between all of those different ways, you are definitely going to be able to pinpoint something in a place. And when prospective clients would come to me and say things like, well, I don't have any planets at all there. And I used to joke with them and say, I bet you I can find something. Because if you're using all those different methods, there's sure to be something that shows up. Now, what's its relevance, and how, what's in terms of how do you prioritize what's more important in looking at the mapping systems? So you may not use one of the minor maps to say, oh yeah, this really overrides the other map, but it's all information. It gives you, again, the planets are alchemy. They're also medicine. Sometimes we're in places that are tough, but it's planetary medicine. It's what you need at the time. It's what's really going to balance things for you in your life. This is something that Jim touched upon, and I do think it's worth noting that as alchemy, that for instance, Saturn and Capricorn types don't always do well in Jupiter zones. So you might say, oh, let's move you to your Jupiter line. And they might come back and say, I hated it there, you know? But then again, Jupiter Sagittarius types do not do well in Saturn zones. Again, you're mixing and blending other aspects of the chart, but this, generally speaking, I would say that, you can kind of rely on certain things, why it's important to look at the chart first to get a sense of the elemental breakdown, the certain patterns, what are the, where are the challenges in the chart, where the things go easier.
For people watching this, when you're saying Saturn Capricorn types or Jupiter Sagittarius types, are you talking natally, maybe they're Capricorn rising with Saturn in the first, domicile strong, and they're quite Capricornian, versus maybe someone who's maybe Sagittarius and Jupiter there on the midheaven, they're a Sagittarius type. Is that what you're kind of talking about with these types?
Yes, yeah. And I think each person has their own way of looking at the chart to determine the type, but that's very much it. You could be Capricorn, a stellium in Capricorn. You could have Saturn rising or at the midheaven. You could have Saturn square your sun, or conjunct your sun in any sign. But in other words, there's a strong Saturnian factor in your chart to begin with, right? Same with Jupiter. And Virgo Capricorn people, let's say there's a big mix of Virgo and Capricorn, and I have a longtime friend who is Virgo Capricorn, Virgo Sun, Capricorn Moon, and she has been having a long transit of Neptune over her chart and also where she lives, and she's just been falling apart. She can't keep anything together. She's so used to being organized and everything in control and everything mapped out. And Neptune's just like how it is with Neptune, it just, everything's coming unglued. However, she's having a wonderful spiritual life. She's gotten much deeper into her spiritual practice there. So there's always something good that can come out of, I don't see the planets as good or bad. Again, their medicine, their archetypes. Is it what you need right now? If it's what you want or what you need, then it's probably going to be good. If it's not what you're looking for, then it's probably not going to work for you. And then I would say the same about Cancer. Strong people with strong Cancer placements, water in general, moon types, lunar types, don't always do well in Mars zones. They're afraid of confrontation. They don't want anybody. Mars is forcing you to, stand up and fight sometimes. But you don't want Mars on your IC if you're living in a place where you want peace and quiet, and you don't want noisy neighbors and barking dogs next door or something. It's just that's and a client called me up one day and he was talking about that. He was saying he has a Cancer moon, but he was saying, the dog is always barking next door, and the guy comes in on his motorcycle in the morning and he revs it up really loud, and I can't sleep. And then, somebody else in the neighborhood was, angry about putting a sign up somewhere. And I said, my goodness, you sound like you got Mars all over the place here, from motorcycles to dogs to, angry neighbors and so forth. And it showed up when we looked at his map that definitely Mars was there. So sometimes it can be just a phase, you know, but other times it can be a more long-term kind of thing. So I just say use the elements of the birth chart as a source to determine what's needed for a particular person. And I will say, I usually go to the sun first. I try to find the sun, the 4 sun lines in the world, to see where they're going to be shining their light, because the sun is the one, really the only one of all the planets that we use as planets that has its own light. Now, I also look at the daytime, nighttime set, and astrocartography will give you the shaded area. You can turn that on to show you where is it nighttime in the world when you were born and where was it daytime. So if you are born at night and you are more lunar, and the moon has more, let's say, dignity in your chart than the sun, you might want to look at the moon as well, because that's carrying the light of the sun. So basically, these are the original 4: Ceres, Pallas, Juno, Vesta. And the asteroid goddesses that can really enhance or represent relationships are Juno and Ceres. Juno, particularly with partnership, Zeus and Hera here, and Ceres, particularly with the mother-daughter relationship, because there was a very big backstory about Ceres and her daughter Persephone. So there's often mother-daughter stories coming up around the Ceres zone, and relationship or marriage stories coming up around the Juno area. And Vesta and Pallas Athena were the 2 goddesses that can coincide with home and career. Vesta was the goddess of the hearth and home. She was also considered a virgin goddess, as was Athena. And the virgin didn't mean I've never been with somebody. It means whether I have or not, I am my own person. You know, I live my own life, not through my partnership or whatever. I don't define myself through my partnership. So Vesta is actually a good place for a home, for people looking for a home, because it is the goddess of hearth and home. It's the sacred flame. It's the what you invest in. It can be good for investing in real estate in a particular area. Pallas Athena is very good for career. I used to tell a lot of people that would come to me, let's say their children who were graduating from college, or the kids themselves had just come out of a training school, let's say massage school or acupuncture school. They would say, where's a good place for me to launch my business? And sometimes Pallas Athena can be very successful because she's the goddess of wisdom. She has the skill set. Her resume, you know, if you submit your resume to a company where your Pallas Athena line is, they might pick yours over 50 other people because maybe you have that one little thing that they want that isn't represented in anybody else's. And I know there are different theories about how to keep your resume sharp and, you know, concise, but sometimes you have to be very clever at finding that one little thing that it might just get you that job that nobody else has. So Athena can be, you know, she's clever, she's skilled, she's the warrior goddess, she knows how to fight and get what she wants, and she's very much connected also to politics. I've seen a lot of people I've had clients who are running for public office at the city or state level, and their Pallas Athena is either prominent in that location, or the transit of it, or somehow it's configured into the map at the time in which they need it to be for a successful run. Now, Eris is one of the new dwarf planets that has just come up in the past, 15, 20 years or so, her discovery. And Eris, of course, has a very deep mythology that a lot of astrologers use to talk about. But I think one of the key words, a couple of the key words that have come up about Eris is that she is a disruptor. She's a goddess of discord. She can stir things up in a place. Okay. Here's a perfect example, Princess Diana. I think we all know the story. At the time that Jim was doing her chart, Eris wasn't around. We didn't have Eris at all in the picture then. So when we would look at her astrocartography map, all we saw was Mercury, basically within the orb of London, close enough. It was obviously right over, and this is where the question of orbs comes in, because her sun is right over there descending. So and Mercury's descending. And remember, before I was talking about how when we're living in a place, the descending planets are often about who you're married to, or who you're working with, or how the public sees you. And it's a little shakier in terms of having your own influence and having your own voice about things. But Jim had always called Mercury, this was his term, the people's planet, as opposed to Jupiter, who was like the god or the leader or the ruler. Mercury was the people. And he had demonstrated that in a few different politicians' charts who were very popular in certain places with the people, where their Mercury was there, because that's where you have a voice, and that's where you, whatever it is, the people connect with it, with who you are. You're just like a regular person. And when Diana first came on the scene, she was fighting very hard to stay a regular person. She was a school teacher. She loved wanting to raise her kids in a way that didn't look like they had all the extra privileges that the world knew they had, but she was trying to give them a very normal, everyday life. And okay, so that was the story. That was the background. But then, okay, now we put in Eris, because now we know Eris has been there all along, even though we didn't know it at the time. Eris on the IC. And do you think, can you conclude at all that she might have been a disruptor in the royal family? That she might have had, in terms of the goddess of discord, she was so unhappy there. She was, it was a really dark energy for her. She was depressed. She was bulimic. She was getting sick all the time. She had to deal with Charles and his mistress, and it was and a family that really didn't accept her, except for how they wanted her to be. And this is the other thing. I mean, she is a Cancer. She was a Cancer sun, very sensitive. Mercury also in Cancer. And so those Cancerian planets descending, how she really took in how she felt, how she was feeling. And so she could not hold those feelings in. Mercury, she finally had to tell somebody and wrote a book and exposed the whole thing. But this is how Eris can operate in a place. Obviously, not for everybody in the same way, but I think you get the picture. If Eris is, and I've seen this in other charts too, if Eris is sitting over an area that you're either living in or want to move to, be aware that you're going to be controversial in some way. And it may be exactly what you want to be. You know, she served a purpose. She shook the palace. She rocked the palace walls, you know. And one little sweet little Cancerian woman rocking this Capricornian tradition. I thought it was amazing. But then when I saw this, I realized, there it is. Okay, there it is. Now she has other things. I've looked at her other maps too. She has other planets there. In fact, a lot of asteroid goddess power in the geodetic map over the UK. So people really did see her as, you know, they really gave her the people gave her the respect and the love that she desired. And that was great to a point, but where she really wanted it was with her partnership and in her family. And
It's such a wonderful example with Princess Diana. And of course, you mentioned she was a double Cancer with the Sun and the Mercury. I believe that Mercury was retrograde and combust as well. But if you go whole sign, you had the Sun, Mercury in the eighth house. So I can't help but thinking about the taboo subjects, especially the hiddenness of the aspects of the royal family. And what I like what you've done with these charts here, not only have you got the lines, you've got this orb of influence or this sphere of influence, and it really shows up on this map as you're showing for Princess Diana and how her life lived at that time.
right. And you're from Scotland, right?
It's a place called Southport. It's just north of Liverpool, which is on the map there.
Okay.
It's close
Okay. I
enough.
was thinking, okay. Because don't the royals go to Scotland a lot? The family.
Yes, I noticed that as well. So that whole sphere of influence extends up to Scotland. So even like, because the royal family would often go to Scotland to get away from the fray, get away from London and all the chaos.
Right.
So for them, for the royal family, especially for the Queen, for Queen Elizabeth, it was her retreat and her refuge. But I think for Princess Diana, even if she went to Scotland, she still didn't feel comfortable, or it wasn't really a retreat for her. And as you're showing on the maps here, I think that applies to the ACG.
Right. I forgot the name of the place they went in Scotland. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, it's completely gone out of my head.
Bal
I know what you're
Bal
thinking.
Balmore.
Balmoral, that's right.
Balmoral. Okay,
Yeah.
Balmoral. Okay. So Scotland, Balmoral is up here somewhere. It's even further away from her Mercury and her Sun. So for her going up there, I mean, it really must have been like kind of going to a dark prison or something, you know. Anyway, that was a tragic story. It was a very tragic story. And I followed that all the way along while it was happening. And it was just, but now, you know, you can see the story, how it's played out. And this is the other thing we're going to be doing in the class. We're going to be doing family relationships. We're going to be looking at personal relationships, but then we're also going to be looking at family groupings. And so in a case like this, you might look at, you know, well, what did the Queen have over England? And we know she had Saturn overhead, an exalted, dignified Saturn overhead over England. You might see what did Charles have there? You know, what did Diana have? What, you know, the principal players in her life, what might they have had in terms of what archetypes, what roles were they playing out? Exactly. And I have a very funny story. I'm not going to get into it now, but I'm going to teach it. I'm going to demonstrate it in the class. But there was a very interesting case in the 1990s of Bill Clinton, who was in his second term of his presidency in America. and the scandalous affair with Monica Lewinsky. And so at that time, I had already the map of Bill Clinton and of Hillary. And we got the birth data of Monica. And then there was this special prosecutor named Kenneth Starr, who was assigned to dig up all the dirt on the Monica Lewinsky case and threatened impeachment of Bill Clinton and threatened to bring down the whole presidency. The astrocartography maps are amazing of each of those players, those 4 players. If you would have handed them a script without knowing what beforehand, and say, okay, you're going to play this part, you're going to play this part, you're going to play this part. It was exactly the planets that they had over Washington that they played out.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So it's another great example of, again, it's not always a family relationship. Sometimes it's a team that you're working with. In this case, a very, tight team. In this case, we could also look at Camilla's chart, Charles's, Diana's, and Camilla's, and see, okay, what was really going on here. With Eris, it could be that in politics and in the royals, there's a history down through the ages that there were always extramarital affairs, and that was just a sort of an unwritten kind of thing that would happen. But if you've got Eris there, like Diana did, it's not going to be, Eris does not respect the status quo. Eris is a goddess, a dwarf planet goddess that says something else. She kind of thumbs her nose up at the status quo. This is another example I came across that I actually really love. Jane Goodall, the primatologist, anthropologist, and educator, one of the world's foremost, if not the foremost authority on the behavior of chimpanzees, born in England. She began her investigative studies of the behavior of chimps in Tanzania. Note both Ceres, the ACG series and the local space series, intersect in Tanzania. Here's Ceres, local space. Here's Ceres on the IC, astrocartography. Now, Ceres is called the mother goddess, the nurturer, and she has been granted the title Mama of the Chimps. And again, the world's leading authority on chimpanzees and their behavior, and really getting right down there and living with them and communicating with them like a mother would do with her children. That she found a place like this with both series. And I know that some people feel that this is a really important spot in the world that called a destiny point, where the ACG planet intersects with the local space of the same planet. That is like a destiny point. And here you can really see it. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this one, because I lived in Santa Fe for so long. It's still sort of my beloved former home. And so I keep track of it. But I think this news came out of Santa Fe. Alec Baldwin is a famous actor who was really famous for playing Trump on Saturday Night Live with the 4 years that Trump was in his presidency before. He played Trump, and he also played lots of things in New York, 30 Rock, but Saturday Night Live and 30 Rock, for which he got a lot of his acclaim and his awards from, take place in New York. And his sun midheaven line is right over New York. He's also starred in a lot of Hollywood films. And over here, we've got Hollywood. And Venus is at the midheaven here. And this is about as far away as Venus as I've ever seen Venus from the sun. They usually can't get too far away. but to go all the way across the country. But what a dream for an actor. Not many people have that. Venus over one coast and the sun over the other. As far as his ability, and both on the midheaven, his ability to really capture attention and get parts and get good pay and just really get starring roles and things. So at one point in his career, 2021, he decided, he was the producer and also the star of a film called Rust. And they decided to film, it was a Western. They decided to film in Santa Fe. And Santa Fe has a huge movie industry, like for Westerns and outdoor shots of the beautiful scenery and so forth. But there's a lot of Western type studios there that you used to see in the old cowboy movies. And so here is Santa Fe. There you are. There's my mouse. So, where does his luck come to a point of limit? Okay, his good luck, his good fortune. Here's Saturn. Here's Saturn descending really, really close, right in the orb there of influence to Santa Fe. That's only like 1 or 2 degrees away from exact. Over here, a few degrees further, is Pluto on the IC. So you got Pluto and Saturn nearby. You've also got an asteroid, Pallas Athena. Pallas Athena in the end probably is what saved him. Anyway, the story is, I don't know if you know the story is that he was holding a gun and he was playing around with the gun and it went off and it killed the cinematographer and it severely wounded another principal crew member. I forgot if he was director or something, but somebody else on the film. And this became a legal case. And it went on for 3 years. And it was just, obviously filming came to a halt. And Alec Baldwin was, in court, in and out of court in Santa Fe, all kinds of publicity. Of course, lost a huge amount of money, on the film and all of that. So there we are with the Saturn. Again, what do you make of something like that? And what would you say to somebody who, who's had very good luck on his Venus, very good luck on his Sun, and now he's going to his Saturn to make a film? And so, he definitely came up against. Now, he claimed the whole time it was an accident. It was an accident. Why was it loaded to begin with? Nobody knows. Nobody could tell. Nobody could say. But it was. But the second question that I always had was, but then why did he just shoot it when it wasn't really in the, he was just playing around with it. It wasn't the scene. So what was he doing there? Now the next chart is interesting because April of 23, this is his Saturn transit. This is the cyclocartography of the transit of Saturn. April of 23, Saturn's on the midheaven just west of Santa Fe. But Saturn takes a while to transit a zone because it goes forward, it goes retrograde, and then it goes forward again. So if it's doing that over a location, you're going to feel the effects much longer than just, let's say, a few weeks or whatever. It's going to take about a year. Here's February of 24. This is finally Saturn is moving away from Santa Fe. But what's interesting in in the research was that in January of 24, he was indicted by a grand jury um, with involuntary manslaughter. But in July, the judge finally dismissed the case. They had to throw it out because of some kind of evidence that wasn't turned in. It was technicalities. It was sort of legal technicalities. So nobody knows for sure what really would have happened. Would he have gotten indicted? Would he have served time? Whatever. But by July of 24, I mean, this is February of 24, Saturn's just still within orb of Santa Fe, but by July, it's like way out. It's already moved way past. So the orb, Saturn's gone, but the shadow of Saturn was moving over this whole time where he already has a natal Saturn to begin with. So I thought that was interesting. And the other thing you can tell from that is the Saturn descending line is over New Mexico, over Santa Fe in his natal chart. And this transit is Saturn at the midheaven. So what does that say? Saturn and Saturn are square. Saturn is squaring his Saturn. So it's not just that Saturn's moving through the area, it's also squaring his own Saturn. And it's coming up as a double Saturn at that time and at that place. So finally, the charges were dismissed, and he's back to what he was doing before. But I'm sure that was a very tense time for him. That was a really, really. He's in Aries. He is basically interesting that an Aries, okay, is accused of firing a weapon and then winding up killing somebody, whether intentionally or not. It's just the metaphor is there. It's a very Martian act.
This is such a great example, not only from the beginning where you've got the sun line, you've got the orb of influence and the Venus in California, as you said, very lucky to have coast to coast as an actor. But as you get further in, you're sandwiched between the Saturn, the Pluto, which can be volatile as well. And then you're getting even deeper with the transiting Saturns. You've got the double Saturns that you've mentioned. So he certainly didn't seek an astrologer's advice on this project.
Probably not. And this is the situation where even if he had, because haven't we all had clients who come to you for advice, but they're still going to go ahead and do what they're going to do anyway, even if you tell them, I don't think that's such a good idea, or this is really not the right time, they might still go ahead with it if they really want. I don't know him personally or, what his decision-making process was, but he's an Aries. He's going to do what he wants to do. And this was the other thing about that I didn't, back when we were showing the examples about, like moon types don't do so well in Martian zones. Well, Martian types do not do well in Saturn zones either. Aries does not do well with Saturn most of the time, I would say. They do not like to be told what to do. They do not like to have their energy reined in. They don't want limits put on them. And when you've got a Martian kind of energy like he does, and then you've got Saturn coming in, it's like, that may not be the
And
best
again,
thing.
with the essential dignities, Saturn falls in Aries, so that relationship isn't great.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Great
So
example.
I think those are most of the examples I have to show for now. Of course, we'll have more for the class. But this is just a little bit about me and my background here. So I don't know, do you have any other questions for me?
Thank you so much, Arielle, for such an insightful and in-depth presentation. I've really enjoyed learning about your history and your relationship with Jim Lewis, and the examples are absolutely fantastic with Princess Diana and Alec Baldwin, and just showing just how accurate and eerie it can be by going to these different places, and such wonderful examples. And for everybody watching, to reiterate, I'm going to include all of Arielle's links in the description and comment boxes. And Arielle, you're also going to be teaching at Kepler coming up as well. Do we want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, that's what this class is going to be, is at Kepler, this deep dive into astro mapping. And so a lot of the slides that I showed here are going to be some of the subject areas that we'll be covering in that class.
Well, Arielle, again, it's just been an absolute pleasure to just talk to you today and to go through these presentations. Again, for everybody watching, I'll leave the links both to the classes and to Arielle's websites. There's also a number of fantastic books that she's written, which I can leave links to as well, and you can see those. And I'd love to have you back on at some point in the future and talk about something else as well.
Okay, I'd love to come back on in the future, and I'm sorry for the coughing and my throat,
Oh,
but
not at all.
got through it. We got.
I'm just glad you're feeling better this week.
Thank you. I
And
am
hopefully it
too.
goes out your system.
Believe me, when an astrologer loses her voice, you realize, okay, the universe is saying you're not working right now. Just, and we do talk a lot in our work, so it was like, okay,
Yeah,
taking care of.
it's like a carpenter who's injured his hands. It's a we need the tool.
Right, right. We got to take care of it. But
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Colin. It's really been great to meet you and to get to know you better, and to have this conversation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Goodbye, everyone.